and welcome to GRAPPL. I'm JP.
And I'm Karen.
How are we? As we have that epic theme play, the one tune they should always play for Wrestle Kingdom.
I was trying not to air guitar in the background. This is such a jam. It's such a pop. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
How are you?
Happy New Year.
Time no see. Happy New Year. How was your New Year?
My New Year was uneventful, just the way I like it. And you know, this past weekend was the weekend of weekends for me. So
it's our proper New Year. This one, It really is. It's like for everyone else who isn't like a hardcore wrestling fan, it's just like, it's a week later. Like that's really what you're waiting from the 4th onwards on there. I had one that was like the kids stayed up late and we watched Wicked, which I didn't see a lot of, but it was the film or the musical. The film, which is a very long film. I'll say that it's like 2 hours 40 minutes, but everyone seems to absolutely love it. The kids kind of liked it. I was like getting drinks and foods and snacks and stuff like that. So I was kind of not quite knowing exactly what was going on during it, but they appeared to be like very excited about seeing the sequel. I thought, well, if it's made you happy, then the film has done its job. So
correct. Yeah. I saw the musical on Broadway back in 2017. My sister and I took our mom there for Mother's Day. But I am curious because it is actually based off of a series of books. So I've been meaning for years. I've been meaning to pick up these books. I'm like, well, finally, I might as well just pick up the books now, watch the movies, and do my, the film student nerd thing that I always do, which is compare: is the books better than the movie?
Is it though? And that'll be the question when you get around to seeing it. But he said, obviously, it's been a monster hit, like worldwide. It's been. Like my son has been working in the cinema over Christmas, and my eldest son, he goes from extremes with me, as you well know. And he has just been. With you. Oh, it is. It's like one of them. It's just like he's a bloke who I'll meet up with for a drink, and the other one's a baby. And then it's like all manner of ages then in between there as well. But we are here. You have taken time out. The Empress of wrestling podcasting, Karen Peterson. You've taken, obviously, you did a brilliant review with Bruce Lord about Wrestle Kingdom, which we'll get into in a few minutes. Primarily, we are going to be talking about Wrestle Dynasty, which was on today, which we've both managed to squeeze in because it was on at what time was it on at over there? Was it 11
started at 11 p.m. So I toughed it out till about 12:30, coming up on 1 o'clock. Went to sleep, woke up around 6:30 when the dog needed to go out. Took her for a walk, put on the coffee, and then watch the rest of it. And then you're like, is 1:30 fine? I'm like, all right, 1:30 works for me. I had time to take a nap, read a book, work on a crossword puzzle,
You did very well out of those for that, because over here it was on at 4 a.m. for that, whereas Wrestle Kingdom itself started at 8 a.m., which for me is a perfect time, because I'm always up early. It
started at 2 a.m. for me. So I waited until I woke up. I woke up at the very beginning of Umino versus Zach, then waited to the very end of the show, and then started at the beginning and just worked my way back.
Well, this is the crazy thing, isn't it? It's like you're in the world of all the European wrestling fans, which is an American wrestling fan is must be a strange feeling. We're having to watch stuff in the middle of the night, and your body clock is a mess, and it's like before you know you're staying up till 4 or 5 a.m.
I could do it. In my 40s, I'm just like, my body's like, you're smarter than this. Why do you hate me so much?
Do you know what, Karen? I don't even attempt it. I just go, this can wait till morning.
This can wait till the morning.
Yeah.
I don't open social media. I quit Twitter, so most of the spoilers that come across my desk are gone now. So,
and you're much better for it. I would say that's one of the best bit of advice.
So much happier since then.
It is, isn't it? It's nice. Join the Blue Sky people. Even though I can't get used to using it at all, but I just find like my life is much better off without Elon Musk. He's doing his best to try and ruin our country as well at the moment. But
I've seen.
You did obviously to speak Wrestle Kingdom, because it's not something that I mean, I think me and Benno will probably end up speaking a bit about it on the weekend show. Yep. But for yourself, I kind of wanted to get, because obviously you reviewed it with Bruce, your regular podcasting co-host when it comes to live reviews for New Japan, and you're always the go-to guys like for that. What did you make of, I suppose, in summary, what did you make of Wrestle Kingdom?
I was pleasantly surprised. That's what it was. Like I kind of went in with very tempered expectations. So I wasn't going to be very angry afterwards, because there have been times where I was very like, all right, it's Wrestle Kingdom. This is going to happen. Like if I get my fantasy booking gets too far away from me, it's very much like, drinking responsibly. I have to fantasy book responsibly. So I'm not really pissed off. And then my whole Saturday/Sunday gets ruined as a result. So it was one of those things where it was like, I know what I want. I know what I want to happen, but I have to understand the reality that it's probably this, and this is going to happen. But it turns out, unlike my G1 predictions, somebody booked this show to shut me up and keep me happy, because Wrestle Kingdom Night 1, I was not angry, not even the slightest bit disappointed in the outcomes. Some of the matches I was kind of like hemming and hawing and be like, I could have wanted better, but it is what Hiroki Goto won the Rambo, so that's all that started my show off on it. 2025 is a 5. There's a 5 in Goto, so you know what? It's Goto's year. That's what I'm going with. Put the belt on him. Don't stop being cowards, New Japan.
I've got some. I've been thinking this for a very long time, and I've been thinking, if you're ever going to do it with Goto, given the general state of affairs in New Japan, this is probably the time. Weirdly, you could do a one last run at the title thing. And I suppose the best analogy probably would be Ricky Choshu of the G1 in 96, where it was just this one last run of this veteran, and in his case, someone who's come so close, never grabbed the brass ring and all the rest of it, to use that terminology. And I think you could actually get away with it, because I think the crowd momentum, because that was my big takeaway from the Rambo, is how the crowd just picked up the moment Goto was in it, because my fear was Sonata was winning. And so when that wasn't the case, I was like, and it was Goto, and I hadn't thought of Goto at all. I should have done it. For some reason, he didn't come to mind.
You didn't think of the 2024 Tokyo Sports Match of the Year winner, Hiroki Goto, at 45 years old?
Who doesn't look 45. He looks brilliant. I tell you, as someone who is over 45, I'm like...
What gets me is him and Taguchi are the same age. Him, Taguchi, me, Meiko Satomura, Naomichi Marufuji, Shibata... That's our 1979. That's the class right there. Oh, and Chris Hero. Throw Chris Hero in there.
That's a cracking crop. Can't argue at all with any of that. I suppose
everyone talks about the Naito Ibushi class. Like, no. 1979 is where it's at, y'all.
For Wrestle Kingdom itself, for the main show, what were your kind of highlights? What would be the big sort of takeaways if people who haven't perhaps gone around seeing it or cherry picking? Where do you think they should go?
Cherry picking matches, I would go with the IWGP women's match between Mayu and Azumi. They only had 8.5 minutes, but they did a lot with that 8.5 minutes. Yep. Takeshita Takagi, hands down, probably match of the night. Brace yourself if you're going to watch Doki Despi. The entrances are great, but it gets called very, very quickly due to an injury. And you can see the injury happen during the match, which I watched it back a couple of times to make sure I saw what I saw, and it was what I saw. And then Yota Tsuji and David Finlay, fantastic. They all were great matches. They did what they needed to do. They didn't overstay their welcome. Surprisingly, I was pleasantly surprised by Tanahashi Evil, but that's only because of Shibata. I really need someone to explain to New Japan how a lumberjack match works. Evil should not be getting a chair at ringside with a towel boy and a water boy and a cabana boy. It should have been Hantai running around, just beating them down and throwing him back in. Thankfully, Bolt and Oleg figured that out near the end. And then the feel-good moment of Phantasmo getting a belt. I mean, he kicked cancer in the kneecaps and just came back, and I may have cried a lot yesterday, but that's just because my heart was very full watching the show, and I was very half glass, not full or empty, just half. But I felt the show left me more over halfway full at the end, which is a nice feeling.
That's good. God bless you, because you're much more an optimist than the rest of us here at GRAPPL, where we're just like the root of cynicism falls deep within. Don't worry, I won't. I've got some positives to say as well about Wrestle Kingdom.
Say that, but you still haven't heard my rant about Umino versus Zach on my review with Bruce. Go back and listen to that, because I do get a little spicy and a little bit salty on it.
We're gonna touch on that in a minute, if that's okay. Absolutely. Again, if you can summon up that energy, that negative energy again. That's a dark phrase. In terms of the highlights, I think I'm kind of with you in the sense that, like, I thought the women's match was, and I went in there with ultra low expectations when we previewed the show. My thoughts were, if I go in here expecting a lot, then I'm going to have some problems. And trust me, there are some problems, particularly towards the top end of the show. Yes. And I think that's unfortunate, because that can be the thing that can end up souring your overall taste on it. I thought, when I was just looking at my notes there, I was like, it's a bit of a strange show, because I thought the women's match, given the time, they just went at it. They were like, it was like a Brock Lesnar match, in the sense he was just spamming big moves. And I thought, I'm kind of fine with this. And I know at some point, me and you, we have to review Runaway Wrestler as soon as I can find some subtitles for that film.
The film is available, because on Stardom's New Year's Day, like, they did like a 7-hour live stream. The last 2 hours, no cuts, no commercials. They air the entire program. So I watched it New Year's Eve.
Okay.
It's a fun little watch, if only to be like, it's kind of like a Where's Waldo. You kind of like try to see which wrestlers and which people make a cameo in it. And then, of course, you've got Kyrie in her, like, acting in there, and she's entertaining, and but it's hard to compare it to Queen of the Villains. The approach and the lens in which it's presented are two very different situations. So you have to think of it more of like a fictitious telling or fictitious retelling of Mayu's journey, because everybody's name is different. No, the only person you have is Mayu Iwatani, but Kyrie is called Takara. Kagetsu is Ragetsu, who's played by Shuri. Like, all the names are changed, and faces are changed to protect the innocent. I don't know, but when you watch it, you see certain things, like, there is the very infamous fight between Act Yasukawa, and where she gets very, very bloodied by I'm blanking on the name. Yoshiko. That whole situation, and the pull apart that happens, and how the company struggles afterwards. Momo Kogo as Fuka was fantastic. But it's very much if you've seen any like slice of life Japanese movies on like Netflix or Hulu, it's more kind of geared towards that, as opposed to this cinematic The Wrestler style masterpiece. But it was a good watch. But there are no English subtitles on it.
Oh, I will find a way, by hook or by crook, Karen. I'm resourceful in that regard.
In the immortal words of Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
It does.
JP finds a way.
He does, normally through some sort of nefarious means to find some dubious subtitling.
I will not be your accomplice on paper.
No.
I know nothing.
But I thought this was like, I suppose my biggest surprise actually was that Mayu won. I was very surprised by that, because of a lot of the talk regarding sort of contracts and stuff. And I suppose we'll see how that plays out as the year goes on. It's hard to know at this stage. You'll probably have a better idea by the end of this month, or going into February.
Probably February, going into February, March. My knee-jerk reaction was, I hope they're not doing it as a means to make her want to stay, as opposed to going into free agency, or possibly going to Marigold, or like, I don't think, from what I've seen of Maya, I don't think she has interest in going permanently to like WWE or AEW. So, but it's one of those things where if she were to go freelance like Sareed has, she could make a lot of money. But I feel like this is kind of, I don't want to say that it's a way of placating her, but at the same time, it's I'm afraid Stardom doesn't know who they are if they were to lose Mayu too.
Yeah.
Azumi's young enough that, you know, she could go freelance or go elsewhere. The problem is that, you know, between Azumi has been on AEW television programming before, so she's on the international radar. Of course, Mina Shirakawa. We'll open that can of worms in a little bit. So I am curious personally to see who stays and who goes in Stardom in the next couple of months.
And that's going to be the fascinating tale. I know we're going to probably say that even about New Japan itself. We'll have a better idea.
Yes.
Probably at time of recording on New Year's Dash, we'll have an idea if there's the definitive, if there's people off, we'll probably get an idea that you'd like to think so. Sometimes I always think they waste the opportunity of it as opposed to years gone by where they've done some absolutely tremendous angles and the like.
I think it depends on who's going to have a match for New Beginning in Osaka on February 12th. Usually New Beginning would have like 2 or 3 shows, but they only have one big show and a bunch of Road 2 shows this time around. So I guess it'll depend on who gets booked beyond January 31st is where we're going to have to kind of hedge our bets on.
That's it, isn't it? And we'll have a better idea. I mean, in terms of my other highlights of the night, I suppose that, you know, they very much mirror a lot of the ones you would have. I mean, for me, my match tonight was the global heavyweight match, just because of it was the one match had more length in terms of David Finlay and Yota Tsuji, which, if there is a big takeaway, it makes me feel that New Japan made the wrong choice for who should have gone in the main event.
Really?
Yota Tsuji for me has always felt like
okay. I thought you meant him losing to David Finlay. I was like, really? What?
Oh no.
Okay. Sorry, that was my misunderstanding.
In some ways, I think him getting the global title, it makes sense if it's a good, long, substantial reign, because then you get an idea about how they are as a title holder and how they carry it. Is he able to headline shows, smaller shows around the country with him on top defending that title? Because if he can do, and I'm not saying this is Nakamura holding the Intercontinental title or even Naito holding the Intercontinental title. But
my fear is that they'll Goto him. That's what I'm afraid. That's my fear.
But I did think to myself, I was like, this is a guy who, in the least, if he wasn't going to win the main event, you could at least be more engaged with the story there as well. I think he's also got a good ability to work a good big match style. Yes. I think I've come away, David Finlay, what I'm down on is Bullet Club as opposed to David Finlay.
Absolutely.
David Finlay in the past has shown that actually he can do big matches. I remember his New Japan Cup run from a few years ago, and that was very unheralded. And it was like, actually, this is a guy who really can, I think can go. And I think he can kind of prove himself as well. So that for me was my match of the night. I'd probably go like 4 stars on it. I'm giving it star ratings. I thought Shingo Takeshita was very good, but it's very short. It was 12 minutes long. And that's a hard feeling to kind of go about, is it that kind of an epic? Does it have that kind of epic feel to it? And for me, it just didn't necessarily have that. I think we got the better incarnation. We got a better idea on night 2 on Wrestle Dynasty, as we'll come to in a little bit. So those are the 3 main matches. Yeah. The Evil Tanner was as good as an evil match is ever likely to be. And saved by, considering again, I was fearing the absolute worst given how shot Tanner is and what evil matches are like. And the TV title, a lot of fun. Love that time limit. Love the idea. It's one of the very few titles that's been created in wrestling where I've kind of been behind it, I think, the entire time. I thought, actually, this is a good idea. 15-minute matches that can turn into a sprint. They always have that the idea of what's going to happen with it. There was a lot of stuff going on in it. ELP winning, I think, is great. It's a good story. I think Oiwa can be saved for bigger. In some ways, I'd love to see him go into a feud with Yota Tsuji as a bigger feud between those two. I think there's a really good story that they could tell there as well. And I think those were very much for me. They were the kind of highlights. And it was obviously Dookie Despy. You can't, right? I mean, it's a freak occurrence. And I think that's just the sad thing. I don't know how you felt about it, but the 2 main events just left me. One of them, I think it's sad what's happened to Naito. And I think it's horrible. As someone I've been very critical about putting Naito in these positions. Yeah. Really shouldn't be there. Whatever the commercial aspect is, I just think there's an element of this guy's eyesight is really failing him. His body is broken down entirely. He shouldn't be in these positions. As a tag wrestler, I'm kind of fine with that, but even then I wonder if that's too much for him. And this is a match that was basically 4 years too late, which I know was cancelled because of COVID, but how did you feel about that one?
It was one of those things that, like, Bruce and I talked about it, and he compared it to beer that had been cellared for too long. And it had this match happened in 2020 like it was supposed to, it probably would have left little to be desired. But for me at this point, I'm very aware of where they're at in their careers, their medical situation, their wrestling acumen, like what they can do and what the limitations are. That if this is the last time, I'm fine with it. I don't need them to revisit it. I don't need it to happen again. I need this to be my closure for Naito Hiromu, because I can't. Hiromu grabbing onto Naito's leg when he was trying to climb the turnbuckle to do the Stardust Plex. That was me. Like, Hiromu was doing the Lord's work and channeling everyone who's always been like, no, stop it. Like a little cat with a spray bottle. Like, knock it off. You're not supposed to be doing this. You don't do it anymore. I know why they put it at the semi-main, because that was always their dream for them to have that singles match. I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it was less than 20 minutes, but I feel like it could have been shorter. But to circle back real quick to Takeshita Takagi, I still think about the tag match they had last month, or last month, and that what they did in that tag match stood out to me more than what they had on this show. This match was fine, but I still think about the tag match more. Plus, I also think about Takagi and challenging Zack, and that was a skate in by the skin of their teeth, like, match of the year contender. So it was just kind of like, but I also don't know how I feel about Takeshita saying that he now is signed with AEW, DDT, and New Japan, because I feel like that's doing too much, and I don't think we'll get him in New Japan. Like, he's not going to be working Road 2 shows. I feel like it's going to be what he is, kind of like a Moxley situation where he shows up to defend his belt, maybe or he'll defend them on AEW television. And neither of that sounds interesting to me. If you're going to be signed to New Japan, commit to New Japan. Don't have one foot on one continent and one foot on the other and try to do both. Because if you're split, your motivation and your attention is split, you're going to half-ass both sides. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I'll probably go into it in a little bit more when we get around to the match against Ishii. But the idea of being an advocate for a long time of, do you know what? You're not utilizing him on AEW TV. There's a lot of talk about how they want to do it. They never actually get around to doing it. This is a guy who, if he was on loan effectively to New Japan and could work DDT, I'm sure that would be absolutely fine. They'd be able to do it in a history of kind of, good co-promoting partners and all the rest of it. This is a guy who would be such a breath of fresh air and would feel like a genuine challenge to Zack later on in the year. Someone who, if you had him around for a year, 18 months, arguably should be challenging for the title at the next Wrestle Kingdom there as well.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the main event of day one for Wrestle Kingdom of Zack versus Shota.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, go on.
It was a match. It happened. It sure happened.
The obvious thing is it's far, far, far too long. Like, there was you said you woke up and this was on. I am very surprised that you didn't immediately fall back asleep. Because that would be like how I would have probably reacted if that had been the first thing I'd seen earlier. For me, it was I had to figure out if I was going to end up rage watching the rest of the show to make sure I met my record time, my live time with Bruce at 1:00 in the afternoon. But it was my biggest caveat for this is that Shota Umino should not be this protected right now. And also, his father should not be allowed to it feels like he's wrestling sometimes, refereeing matches, title matches that he is going for. Because I feel like that, I understand, yes, he's the senior referee, but
the story. This was the same story we had with Ospreay, where Red Shoes was being too lenient. He was giving Shota too much of a he was either pulling the reins too hard in or letting him have what he wouldn't give other competitors the same leniency in a match. And it's I don't want Red Shoes. Shota will never be able to be the wrestler or the ace that he thinks he is and wants to be, so long as his father's always meddling in his business. So they need to at least for title matches that involve Shota, Red Shoes should not be officiating those matches. If I'm to take any challenge for any belt involving the two of them seriously,
I generally agree with you in terms of him being protected, and I've got a really funny relationship with Shota Umino. Not personally, he was over here for obviously a long period of time, working and for a long period of time he was very underwhelming. This was the guy who kind of, it looked like Tanahashi cosplay, and you went, I know why he's here, but this is a guy who, the impression I always got is that he just didn't like being in England necessarily, which I don't blame him. There's large swathes of us who feel that way quite a large period of our lives. But there is the part of me of this feels like it's the wrong character. I think you could do stuff with Red Shoes, but with him as arguably a horrific heel. The idea of him perhaps even going outright to kind of sacrifice his father in essence to get his career goals. I would be kind of okay with that. I could see the long-term sort of story there. This is the guy who's being effectively it's a very similar to a Naito storyline for all intents and purposes. This is a guy who gets pushed into a main event of a Wrestle Kingdom. The fans aren't accepting it. They're not on side with this. They see this as too much too soon. And is he a Nepo baby? All of those types of things. And I think you can play into that really well. And I think that's where my problem really comes in, is that I wanted him to attack his dad, have him act like an entitled brat. I thought all of those things. I think that's the real hope for him, because for me, Tsuji, Oiwa, Yu Yamura, they're all guys who I would have, if Yamura was fit, they're all guys I would have had in there, arguably above him. And they're in the strange part of their development where it feels like they've wasted a lot of time. They've wasted some crucial years in not putting people into the right places. They have got guys they can go with, and we don't really know if they're going to work until we put them in there. But Shota Umino was the one that I think we all would have been most secure on. Currently, this isn't going to work, and it didn't work. Yeah. And I don't know if they were trying to make up time because of the Dookie injury or whatnot, but 40 minutes was so excessive. And it reminded me of the worst kind of Zack Sabre Jr. matches that we used to get here until when he went into New Japan full time, and he became a much more sort of pacier worker, where it was exhibition style stuff for large periods of time. And I was thoroughly bored, and I always think that's the cardinal sin for this stuff.
My biggest thing about this match was that with as fast and as consistently moving as Zack Sabre Jr. is, if you're going to give me a 44-minute match, I need to be captivated for those entire 44 minutes. And there were times where it felt like I was watching two separate matches. If you were and I made this comparison on the show yesterday, is that if you were to take all of Zach's work and cut Umino out of the entire match, and you're just watching what Zach does, 5-star classic, best wrestler in the world, Danielson, Ospreay, all of that, all the greatest hits of Zack Sabre Jr. And then you cut together all of Umino's contributions to the match. It's so inconsistent that you feel like you're watching two different matches. And then the parts that were good, I felt like Zach was carrying him through this entire match. And if you are going to be the champion of a company, you can't rely on your opponent to carry you through the match, because you are supposed to be the one who's going to be gauging the pace. You're going to be the one who has to carry the inexperienced guys moving forward. And it's heartbreaking, because the expectations and the hope, especially now that Tanahashi's on his, officially on the retirement road, Tanahashi has told Shota, you're supposed to be the guy. And then you watch this match and it's like, Is it too much pressure for him? Is it, between the homages to Tanahashi and Moxley and Ospreay and Chono, is it too many personalities and too much pressure all put onto one person because they didn't do enough as a company the last 3 years to build anybody up, because they had Naito, they had Okada, they had Tanahashi, and they had Hiromu. And I feel like it's too little, too late, but also too soon, all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to be cautiously optimistic, but I feel like Shota needs to go back to the drawing board. He needs a character reset. He needs to do whatever he's doing, fighting Moxley and the Death Riders and all of that, and stay away from the title. I don't need him winning the G1. I don't need him winning the New Japan Cup. I need him to figure out who he is, because there are other guys in his age bracket that know what they're doing. Ren Narita, it's sad that he's sold out Ren Narita, but at least he knows what his job is for the foreseeable future. Is he good at it? It is what it is. But at least he knows what he has to do. And I feel like Umino is trying to still be like selling the image that I'm the guy, but either people don't care or people are now actively revolting against it.
And that's the thing. Weirdly enough, and I would say go back to like, I think when watching this is like, I went back to Naito. I was like going, there are always situations that we always think as wrestling fans are completely unsalvageable.
Yeah,
this is salvageable with him. But it requires a 180-degree turn. In the case of Naito,
and the willingness to learn and to do what you are told.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you go to Naito, you go to that idea of him not getting the main event at the Dome and losing that vote. He loses quite definitively to Okada. It's not a great classic Tokyo Dome main event at a time when the standard was ridiculously high because of the other guys that were there, who were also much more at a physical peak in the case of, like, say, a Tanahashi. And what happened? He goes away to Mexico. He comes back. There's a new character, and that character immediately kind of engages. And it plays on all of that history. And I think in many ways you can do something similar with that, with Shota Umino. It's just that it took this match to do that, because I would say, if there's a Shota Umino match you should watch, it's easy to say the match with Will Ospreay, but really the match with Will Ospreay, that proved that he could hang at that high level with somebody who is like a phenomenal, ridiculously good wrestler. And he can go to that kind of level and have that. And that was the thing in kind of like a bigger picture view of New Japan before we get onto Wrestle Dynasty. I don't know how you feel about that. There's just things where there are some changes that, and for a long time I've been saying there needs to be change in New Japan. There needs to be these changes. And it's just like, okay, a lot of the stables, I'm hoping that we're effectively getting to hopefully a dissolution of LIJ. I'm hoping that Bullet Club just goes chaos,
dissolve them all.
Yeah. I would, if anything, it's something like you need like a kind of like a new blood faction. If you're going to have one faction in there of a group of younger guys going, no, we are going to tear down this company. We're going to build it up in our image. That might be something, but but all of the things I used to love about classic New Japan were things like, and it's going to sound like some of them are quite silly. Not only do you have like incredible matches, you've got this level of presentation, the lineage of the titles, the structure, even the challenger coming out after the matches, and it's just a quite orthodox way.
I was surprised we didn't have any of that on either night. Like,
and that saddens me.
Because I would say keep United Empire and keep TMDK, because they're the ones who actually have things going right for them right now. But I would rather them be at like the point where they just do what Stardom used to do before Bushiroad purchased them. Have a draft. You pick your leader of their faction, you have the four of them wrestle, and then you just go in rounds. You pick, you poach, you take who you want, whether they like it or not. Everybody starts thinking of new characters, new ways of doing things, because I feel like New Japan is too comfortable right now. And they are with, especially when it comes to Bullet Club, this is like, I looked at the numbers and I don't usually do attendance numbers. I'm not a numbers girly, but I looked at the numbers of this year compared to last year. But then I also looked at 2020 when I went to the Tokyo Dome. And for a pair of shows that are on a Saturday and a Sunday, when I was at the Dome in 2020, it was 40,000, 30,000, 70 for the weekend. This was 25 or 22 and 12,000 on a Saturday, Sunday with early start times that people could still travel home afterwards. And that is heartbreaking. That also shows that the cards that we were given this weekend were not enough for people to want to stay for both shows or to even go to either show.
That's it. I think you've hit the nail on the head when you get down to the nuts and bolts of this. I think when you do the comparison around the figures, it's that Saturday, Sunday. I'm really glad you brought that up. It's the Saturday, Sunday is the bigger deal. January 4th falling on a Tuesday, obviously, work.
It is what it is.
Everything else, it is. There's going to be a struggle. In that way, you're going to really see, like, what is the value of this card there? I shudder to think if this had been midweek, what this would have been drawing. Yeah. This would have been seen as being like a much better weekend for it. But maybe all along, and even though I think the argument goes that 10,000 people went to the wrong show, maybe all they need is a bit of AEW in the mix to produce a better card. I don't know. That's a controversial opinion. That seems like fighting talk from me.
I think my biggest complaint about this 2 days as a whole is AEW ran shows concurrently with this one. And you're missing out on people who had legacy and stardom, like Jamie Hayter and Tony Storm. You have Will Ospreay, Jay White, and Kazuchika Okada. And had you put those three on these shows, I mean, I made a joke that, they should put Okada in the Rambo and see what happens. But I feel like you would have bumped, even just adding them to the card without saying what match they were in, people would have changed their plans to see them wrestle. Yeah,
they would have done. And I wouldn't have blamed them for that at all. And I think that's a big part of, you've mentioned it there. That's like a big part of the problem is that as a partner, you look at what AEW could do and it's like, well, you're running Collision live when you don't need to run it live. You could have taped that show and put it out there because you've got this other big show, and you could have been plugging the fact that this big show is going to be following as well. But they never did any of that stuff on there as well. I mean, we're going to get into Wrestle Dynasty now because obviously that was this morning. That was the big show. How did you find fitting it all in? You managed to fit it all in okay?
But with time zones, it was because it started so early because it was a Sunday show, I started watching at 10 p.m. And then by like 12:30, I was like, I'll just watch the rest of this in the morning. Because it was, as much as I wanted to watch Kenny versus Gabe Kidd in real time, I was like, my body's like, you're in your 40s. What the hell are you doing? The New Japan World will be waiting for you in the morning. So I was like, you know what? I went to sleep.
That's definitely the way I think to approach that. And don't worry, we're not going to be doing sort of move by move breakdowns as much as anything else. Just sort of the general thoughts. Yeah. That's not how I roll anyway. I struggle with that at the best of times. I leave that to people much better than me, whether it's Gareth, whether it's Benno.
I let Bruce do all that heavy lifting, so I understand.
Thank God for that. But I mean, I would say, for this overall, I mean, we'll get into overall thoughts at the very end, but I thought, one of the things I would say, the pre-show had 2 matches on there, one of which I was shocked and I don't think should have been on there at all. And the other one was Sons of Texas defeating House of Torture in a standard tag team match that was perfectly fine. I like Dustin Rhodes. I have a bit of a soft spot for him, and that's fine. Even if the Deadpool Wolverine thing was like, okay, seems to have gone. You've gone a lot of trouble here for a pre-show.
That's what their gear was. Okay, I was wondering. Yeah. I'm like, it's a little too on the nose right now, but okay. It should be the other way around. I feel like Dustin Rhodes would be more like the grizzled, annoyed Hugh Jackman Wolverine instead of Sammy Guevara.
Exactly. Grizzled vet. That's very much screaming Dustin Rhodes for it. But I would say that the Women's Cup Final 4-way match, I thought, which they'd actually spent a lot of time in terms of all of the various companies building to. And it was a pre-show match at the very, very beginning as people are filing in. So it's even a much smaller crowd.
Yeah.
However, I would say I thought this was actually I thought this was like a decent opener. I just wish it had been treated with a bit more respect. if only for the big shocker of Athena being pinned for the first time in 2 years by Momo Watanabe, and having Thekla run interference in the meantime, pulling out the referee there as well. Willow being Willow, and that generally means she's being great and being the kind of powerhouse there. Persephone, not knowing too much about her because the CMLL women's division is kind of slightly all over the place. But I thought actually she kind of held her own. Which was, given the pressure in the situation, there's a lot being thrust onto her. He says, the man in the CMLL t-shirt. But what did you make of that as an opener? Did you enjoy it?
I think the difficult thing for me was that there was no way for me to watch all of the matches for that led, like the tournament matches. I would have to have gone to all of the different promotions, individual things to watch them all. And that's a lot of work. A promo package is great, but if you're going to have this on New Japan World, all of those matches should be, even if it's like you make it like a Stardom, like a Stardom, like a 1 hour, you just clip them all together. All the AEW stuff, all the RRA stuff, make them into like, here is the all of the matches, or just throw them on the YouTube channels and be like, here are all the matches, and send people to watch them, because I was genuinely interested, because, you know, Athena, when she was in NXT as Ember Moon, that was peak NXT for me. I watched a lot of her matches, so I am glad to see what she does on Ring of Honor, but I don't have Honor Club. I don't keep up with Ring of Honor now that AEW owns it. I was a bit of a brat on the internet because, you know, Blue Sky is the safe place, but the trophy for this international cup that they had, they recycled, I believe, the old Super Junior Tag League trophy for this, because it just has victory and then champion on the other side. If you're going to go through all of these lengths to create a tournament for the biggest show of the year, drop the money and buy a damn trophy. Like, don't go like, hey, what do we got in the old storage closet that we hope nobody catches on to? Because I was like, I remember Roppongi 3K with that trophy. And what did I do? I just put a Blue Sky tweet or whatever you want to call it over there, being like, oh, so Momo Watanabe is now a Super Junior Tag League winner. And then with a picture of, you know, Roppongi 3K and like a Ricochet and Matt Sydal, all with the same trophy. So it's if you're going to go this far to make a point to have a match like this, drop the couple of $100 and buy something. Or, you know, if they're getting, because I think she gets a pick at whatever title that she wants to go for. So it's, I guess, either, you know, Mercedes in her 85 titles, or, you know, maybe one in Stardom, or maybe one in, I don't know, was seeing as she pinned Athena, maybe the Ring of Honor title. I don't know. But like, do the stupid, like, big cardboard, like, here's your golden ticket, or not a briefcase, please. Anything but a briefcase. But like, make it mean something other than, here you go. Like, it was just so, I'm like, the picture of her hoisting the trophy, very badass. But that trophy is bigger than any trophy that Stardom has. Like, not height wise, but like presentation wise.
Oh yeah. I was enormous, ridiculously sized thing. I mean, I think my other really big takeaway, I think, from this is that I know Athena's staying on for an extra week or so. I think she's going to be involved in a. She did the Stardom New Year show, and I think they're building a feud between her and Tekla. So I think Tekla might be challenging for the Ring of Honor Women's title on a show sometime soon. Where? Who knows? I think that's a good shout. And I also think as well that you get Momo Watanabe over for whether you do Supercard of Honor in Vegas for Mania weekend. I think that's when you have that, and have Athena avenge her loss there as well. But I mean, I just thought that the booking side of it was kind of interesting, and it doesn't lose a lot for me for the idea that Athena loses by like kind of nefarious means as well.
Yeah, Tekla getting involved kind of helped soften the blow.
Yeah, and she has real presence
of such a streak. Because she's gone undefeated for a very long time.
Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely. And it's one of the things I often look, I just go like, just put her on AEW TV, because being sort of shunted to the side in Ring of Honor, it doesn't help anyone really long.
And she shouldn't have to carry Ring of Honor by herself. That's the other thing.
God, no. Oh, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous for that. But I mean, we got into the main show proper. I mean, for the most part, we had Walker Stewart and Chris Charlton there as well. I'd Walker Stewart as my commentator of the year because I just think he's, for the age he is, and I think the amount of work, and you can just see the levels of improvement that you just think, this is like really good. Chris Charlton, I mean, on our Discord, he creates so much kickoff. Like there's not a lot of love for him, and I think there were points where he went to just the ridiculous, like kind of lion mark defense force, and it was like, mate, come on, like
I listen to Japanese commentary, so I've got no dog in the fight.
That's all. Well, then you probably dodged the bullet on that one. And then we had Rocky Romero come later on, and I think Rocky Romero's always been really good when it's come to New Japan commentary in there as well. I mean, we had the 8-man gauntlet match. I don't necessarily have a whole lot necessarily to say for this one on here.
It was just fun. It was silly lucha fun. The thing that stuck out the most to me was when Despy finally comes out with the belt and everyone's like waiting for him, like everyone's like hanging on the ropes. They're like, "Come on, buddy, come on!" And then they just rush him on the ramp, and there's no room, and they're all like trying to like get at him. They're all like trying not to fall off the ramp, and Despy's just like, "Guys, just give me a minute."
And then we got
me versus my inbox tomorrow morning.
And then we got like Ishimori stealing the pin, which I think is fine because he's the guy who's around there. If you're wanting to go to a kind of a first junior title defense, I mean, my aim would be not to have Despy in. I think Despy's should be around the Never division. I think that's where he should be. I think there's been we've got to those places before. I think it's always been really good. I just think he's done everything he can do necessarily from a junior perspective. Yeah. Although the night before would have been his big win at a Tokyo Dome show in a junior match.
I feel
that was sad he didn't get that
plan
big moment.
Was actually for Doki to keep the belt and finally, beat Despy again. But it was I'll give Despy this. I'll give him all his flowers, even though he probably doesn't want them, is the way that he pivoted the entire attention of all the cameras and everything away from Doki, even though he was probably the first one who wanted to run over there and get involved. So I think Despy's in I know he's like, whether he's a heel or not, he knows he's a company man, so he's going to do what he needs to do. And if that means he has to carry the junior division a little bit longer until they put the belt back on Watto or Robbie, or finally figures out what the hell he's doing with his life, or
who can tell with that one on there. I'd also give a shout out for Mascara Dorada, who is very temperamental. Sometimes he can hit or miss, and I thought he was hitting on this particular night, sort of like throwing himself around. So that was the opener on that. And then we got to...
I don't know how I feel about Soberano as a heel, though. That's the one thing I'm not too sure about just yet.
I'm never sure enough outside of I'd need to see him in the context of how does it work at Arena Mexico. Yeah. Because if it works there, then I'm like almost convinced. Then I'm like fine with it. Yeah. But then outside of it, it's quite hard to get kind of a gauge on it. I mean, I've a lot of love for Hechicero. He was over here for the Rev Pro's Copper Box show, and it's him and Zach, and that was a great match. It was like arguably match of the night, that one on there as well. And then we followed it up with a grappling match they've been set up the night before. You mentioned him when Katsuyori Shibata came out, and it was him and Tanahashi. It was nominally meant to be a grappling match, and it very much turned into a chop fest that felt like it is leading to something else. I'm completely fine by this. This is fan service, I think, in the extreme. It's impossible to rate in any kind of meaningful way. Yeah. I would love to see Katsuyori Shibata in New Japan, not in AEW or Ring of Honor. That I feel very, very strongly about. I agree. There's a ceiling for him there, and that ceiling is actually quite low, a lot lower than what it should be. Whereas I think in New Japan, I think you can get your big nostalgia runs. You've got your matches with Goto in there as well. Part of Tanahashi's last year, the kind of irony being of Shibata being the one guy who's kind of like sort of made it through to the very end. But this was kind of fun, and we'll go back to it, I think, in a proper match later on in the year. But it also made you feel like this is a crowd that, if you're going to bring people back into the fold, Shibata is one of those guys, because he would be tremendous. And even just having him around the dojo, because we've seen him as a trainer, he's an excellent trainer as well.
I think it's one of those things where it's just like I was surprised at the sudden proposal of it all yesterday with him going to Tanahashi, like, I know you just wrestled, but if you're not tired, how about we we have a match tomorrow. And Tana's like, yo, you know me. I've never been tired a day in my life. And I'm like, I wish I had that outlook on life because I'm tired every day of my life. But
yeah.
Did I get misty-eyed? Yes. Was I in my fangirl feelings? Absolutely. Did this need to be 20 minutes? No. It was exactly what I needed. It was a time limit draw. And yeah, I would like to see more of Shibata on New Japan programming. Even if he doesn't plan on moving back to Japan anytime soon, start putting him on New Japan Strong. Like, he's in the States, he's there. Like, I need the New Japan talent that are working in AEW to be more featured on New Japan Strong, New Japan programming, both in the States or internationally and in Japan. And I think Shibata would be a good way to boost ticket sales, but they're going to have to use him very sparingly.
I think so. I mean, they've got those big shows lined up. They have him, they've got him in Chicago, and obviously they've got Battle in the Valley next weekend, haven't they, as well?
Yep.
And that'll be, it'd be. I think he would shift a few tickets. I think him in that environment absolutely would do as well. This was followed up by, and there's international ramifications on this one. As we had Mercedes Monet. What am I doing? That's a Freudian slip. Mercedes Monet versus the undisputed British Women's Champion. The reason she's got two belts is it's a merger of the Rev Pro Women's title and the Southside Women's title, which was a defunct promotion, and that Rev Pro bought it up and run all those places now as well. That Mina Shirakawa title versus title. I don't think it was any surprise. We all kind of guessed what was going to happen here. Mercedes Monet won. Just over 14 minutes of what I thought was generally good work, even if it didn't have the drama that I kind of would have liked. I mean, I always thought Mina Shirakawa has made the most of what she has in order to kind of really stand out. When I think of when I was in my sort of prime stardom watching, she was a fun undercard wrestler who joined English language commentary. That was like kind of primarily what she did. I think you've got an interesting situation here for Mercedes Monet. I'd say from a British perspective as Rev Pro Women's Champion, because now she's got 4 belts. That's a lot to carry around, and I'll add to her luggage costs, as you'd be in a better position to ever tell me about how those are going to be added up from what you were doing in a previous life.
She can afford it.
She can. But as British Women's Champion, I think I'd expect her hopefully to see it. Crystal Palace would seem like a very good venue for her to be at. I think you can get anything up to what sort of like 3,500, and I think you do a very good number with her out there as well. All of the problems people have with her winning the title, I think I can kind of see where they're coming from, but I think the thing to remember is it's not always been like a very well established title. They've done a lot of good work in the last 18 months in particular of getting it to this place. I don't expect her to drop it to, say, a Danny Luna or an Alex Windsor. However, if she holds on to it from a commercial perspective, I think this is absolutely, I think it's like kind of like a no-brainer. You've got a chance to bring in Mercedes Monet into Britain, into an independent company. I think you do that, and I think you go with that. And yeah, if she loses it in a multi-woman match and she's not the one who takes the pinfall, I can live with that because I'll understand what the commercial side of this necessarily is. It's not always going to make for good drama, though, necessarily. And she will do the job, as we saw with Mayu Iwatani, who beat her pretty definitively for the IWGP Women's belt. So, I don't know. What did you make of this as a match?
My thing was that I really wanted them to take a chance and put the belt on Shirakawa, because she's, since New Japan started touring again in the United States back in 2022, she was at the show in Rumble on 44th Street in New York City. She loves coming to the United States. She's been to multiple New Japan shows. So I was really hoping that they were going to stop this double gold dash thing. Like, this is me just nitpicking. If you're defending the New Japan Strong Women's title, that should be the belt around your waist when you walk in. You should not be wearing the belt of your other company around your waist, even though it's the bigger belt. You should be showing off with the costume the belt you're defending. I understand the upside. I mean, I didn't realize that Rev Pro has the Mercedes Monet, but good for them. Unless it's gonna be very or those tickets are going to be really, really high. I feel like it was an interesting choice because, Mina Shirakawa has been so popular on AEW programming, especially with her rivalry with Mariah May and all that given that right now is contract renegotiation resign time for Japan, I could easily see Mina going into free agency. And AEW is either going to have to make a big play for her or worry that WWE is going to swoop in and yank the carpet right out from under her. Because the only belt she hasn't held in Stardom is the World of Stardom Championship, but she just had a singles match in the Tokyo Dome, so I don't think that she necessarily needs one unless she's going to be the one to dethrone Mayu for the IWGP Women's. So again, it all depends on what the plan is for Mina, but Mina, I feel like, can bounce back, but it's going to be very weird seeing if they're going to be putting her on a lot of New Japan Strong shows. What does she do if she can't win the title? Because they had a long build up to this match. So, yeah. No, I'd be in I would be in agreement with you. I think her bargaining power is as good as it's ever been in wrestling for her, and I think that's absolutely fair enough as well. I mean, what followed on from this, I think, were 3 matches that all feel like it merges into one. Maybe I'm wrong about this because I don't know if any of them are distinctive enough. And that was, as he says, as his screen is kind of frozen on this. If I'm right on the running order for it, we had Brody King versus David Finlay next, which, again, Finlay was going to get his win back. I like Brody King. I thought this was, in the main, generally fine, but I don't think there's too much more on that other than it plays into the interpromotional aspect there as well. And then we had Shota Umino versus Claudio Castagnoli, which obviously there was a bit of a storyline with the promo package from Jon Moxley, and Claudio attacks him on the ramp, but again, it's kind of like a lot of the issues that we've mentioned with Shota Umino before, where there isn't that kind of crowd investment necessarily, but he got the win that he probably needed at that point in time. So those 2 matches, and then one from slightly later on in terms of Yota Tsuji versus Jack Perry, they were for me, they were the proper, I don't know, they just felt like sort of standard singles matches you could have with a combination of guys, all of whom on the AEW side are just in that upper mid-card kind of role. Was there anything about any of those 3 matches that stood out for you? I feel like I would have been more invested in David Finlay versus Brody King if House of Black and the War Dogs were involved, because you have the option to build, especially because, Finlay's based in the United States. You could build shows for the New Japan USA shows where you get Buddy Matthews over, you get Malachi Black, even if they can't go all the way to Japan, at least do the matches on your Battle in the Valley or your Capital Collision or what have you. For Umino versus Claudio, I love me some Claudio, but it's if Umino has to fight his way through all of Death Riders to get to Moxley, Claudio should be the guy right before Moxley, not the guy that you fight first, because it's not Claudio, Pac, Wheeler Yuta, John Moxley. It's Pac and or Wheeler Yuta, Pac and or Wheeler Yuta, Claudio, then Moxley.
Yep.
But it was good to see Claudio back in a ring in Japan. The match was fine, but given how dominant Claudio was during the match, it was just I would have rather seen Shota get a sneaky win, like a quick roll up, as opposed to a full use my finisher finish. If that makes any sense. And then Jack Perry versus Tsuji. I mean, it was a good first defense. I don't know how Jack Perry keeps getting all of these IWGP. I don't know who he's got dirt on, but he keeps getting all of these title matches when there are plenty of other people that should be having them. Yeah.
Oh, I'd be with you on those as well. And I think it was the weakest of the matches, primarily down to Jack Perry. I don't think he He doesn't have the kind of in-ring clout that, say, a Brody King. I'll speak a lot about people who, if New Japan were going to bring in someone in for an extended period of time, Brody King feels like, of all of the guys, like that's the guy with the most upside to him. But then I think there's good upside from an AEW. I think this is a guy who, if they ever were able to ever focus, which is not something that a company can really ever do at all, on younger, more unheralded talent and get them to a better place. I think Brody King is that guy. If Brody King was doing like a G1, I think I'd be down with that.
Put him and Claudio in the G1, let's be honest.
Oh yeah, I'd be perfectly down with that. And I mean, and Claudio, not because of his involvement in Death Riders, which is not an angle that I thought there was a point that you could salvage it. I've realized you can't. That's just never happening for that. But that felt to me like they were 3 matches that kind of padded out. They all went roughly the same amount of time as well, between 12 and 14 minutes. What we did have, though, in between those matches, I think, I mean, it's certainly one of the matches of the night. It's not my match of the night. I know it's not your match of the night either, but I thought this was a cracker. Konosuke Takeshita defeating Tomohiro Ishii to defend his never openweight title and AEW international title. This was like old school Ishii, wasn't it, Karen?
This was the Ishii we get in the G1 that does like a Hurricanrana when you least expect it. And it's one of those things where this is where I get back on my soapbox and how I don't like double title matches, because you're tying up too many belts in a singular program. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do like that. I guess this was their way of like saying that Takeshita is going to be part of the company moving forward. But then the problem always becomes, how do you separate these titles moving forward? Because New Japan titles shouldn't be if you're going to merge titles, don't merge them into titles with another company. Merge them with your own company titles, because you have the global, take the global, the never, and then the New Japan open weight. If you're going to merge titles, merge those 3 together. Like, don't tie. There shouldn't be this double gold dash all the time. We learned our lesson, I thought, back in 2020, 2021, that we don't need this.
No.
But now we have it for multiple titles, and it's unless these individuals that are the champions are on all the New Japan shows in the United States and they're defending the New Japan titles on New Japan shows. I don't want to see Takeshita defending this on Dynamite or whatever other programming they have, because Collision's gone now, or Rampage is gone now, or they're all gone now. I don't know. Or on a Ring of Honor show. Like, I need a separation of church and state, as it were. I need them to figure out where they're going and how they're going to defend it. It feels like they have no plan. So they're just putting all the belts on the hot young guy, as opposed to how this is going to impact the company in the next calendar year.
Yeah, no, I'd be kind of with you on that, because I dislike the AEW international titles. The title just doesn't need to exist. It's a company that's got far too many titles.
That is another problem that both companies have, is too many titles.
But as a match, I thought this picked the crowd up massively. Yeah. It was like old school Ishii, and it's not something you see a lot of these days. I think his AEW run it's been upsetting to watch, because this was a guy as well who, when he was over here as British heavyweight champion in Rev Pro, he was a genuine draw. Like him versus Keith Lee, like him and Walter. Him versus Keith Lee is like that first match is one of the best. I remember that match. Yeah. Incredible. Like, just going to that, he was the draw. It was like, oh, this guy is absolutely special. We'd had Shibata as champion not too long before that, and that was great fun. This was 13 minutes. This is kind of what you want a never open weight title match to be. Big bombs, big hits. Obviously, there's a size differential, but you forget it with Ishii, and he's such a great seller as well. And I just thought this was absolutely tremendous stuff from the pair of them. I mean, I'd go like 4.25 for this, giving this a star rating. This was definitely up there for me. It was like, and I thought it was better than the Shingo match the night before. I just thought they had it felt like a lot more kind of like common sense for me. And it was just like, if you bring an Ishii onto a big match show, this is what you do with him. And I was absolutely grand with that in the meantime. If you haven't got any other thoughts on that, we're going to move to the tag title match on here, where we had the Young Bucks winning the IWGP, the vacant IWGP tag team titles, defeating the LIJ team of Hiromu and Naito, who'd obviously won tag league. We then had Great O'Khan had earlier come out with his, what was it, the day before or 2 days before that he'd come out and said it was going to be him and Jeff Cobb? It was the day before, wasn't it? It was at the press conference afterwards. How it was going to be Jeff Cobb, who, I mean, I have to say I did get a real pop out of him doing the Naito stuff in the corner and just diving over the top. I didn't expect to see it, much like when he did the plunger over the top in the TV title match. I was like, I thought you were injured, mate, but somehow you're absolutely making a mockery of your injury status as well. I have to say, as a three-way match, with Bucks very much doing Young Buck style stuff. Yeah. This was kind of fun. This was a fun, easy watch, I thought, for 13 minutes. I've not always been able to say that about New Japan tag matches, but what did you make of it?
My thing is that unless the Young Bucks are going to be working the entire New Beginning tour, why are they putting the titles on them? You had Naito and Hiromu won the World Tag League. You gave them a singles match when they won the World Tag League. Why are you not just putting the belt on them for now? Because they will be at all the shows. Like, I don't like all of these titles going on to people who aren't in New Japan all the time. Let alone the Young Bucks are like a bad penny. They just show up around Dome season and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna be a Dome match, and it just. I'm not going to say that it cheapens the title, but it kind of eliminates the purpose of having a tag tournament, which in the last few years, when it was Goto and Yoshihashi and God, people who were winning it were making it mean something. And it feel like they just threw the baby out with the bathwater this time around. They're like, oh, well, it's an AEW co-branded show. And my biggest gripe about AEW New Japan co-branded shows is that I always feel like there's an imbalance as to who gets the wins and who doesn't. I don't feel like the Young Bucks needed to be protected. They own a company. They should be focused on putting other people over. And it's like, what do you do with United Empire, which is one of the only groups that are doing really well right now? So I was just kind of disappointed that was the outcome. It was fun to watch if you're watching it through the filter of a casual fan, but at the same time, it was kind of like, what was the point of November to December in New Japan for the tag division?
Yep. As my computer decided to crash out on me there during...
I was like, why is my face so big?
Do you know, it happens anytime I'm going between tabs and StreamYard. It's like, yeah, it's not having that. It wants no part of it. So I have to really quickly refresh and dive.
I'm sweating now. I'm like, oh God, no.
That's a bit of jeopardy, Karen.
Don't leave me in charge of the show.
You know what StreamYard's like as well. It's a temperamental beast at the best of times for that. Yeah, it's I mean, if we see these title belts in AEW, I'm going to be upset. I mean, in some ways, do you know what I want them to do? And I've said this about sort of Naito beforehand, and I fear this, but in some ways, just go to the tag match with him and Hiromu. Have it maybe at, I don't know, it could be even, you can get away with it, perhaps up to Chicago and the Wintrust Arena, the Windy City Riot. Yeah. Have the tag change there, and then let Naito and Hiromu have that title run, and that'll be kind of good enough for me. But the match that followed that, I think it did follow this one. Yeah, no, it didn't actually, because it was Yota Tsuji, Jack Perry they had in between it, but we've already spoken about that. But we did have what felt like a lot of the main event, particularly for the build, particularly for somebody coming back in Kenny Omega from an ultra long-term injury. And by God, AEW need him like they never needed someone else to come back ever. We had him versus Gabe Kidd. We'd had a build to it. I know what Gabe Kidd can be like. Certainly he's a character. It's a hard beast because it's very much like him channeling his inner top boy. I don't know if you've ever seen that on Netflix, but he's, very much likes playing the kind of like gangster and everything else. But this, I'm going to swear here, and I've been on good behavior because you're here. I thought this was fucking incredible. I absolutely loved this. I've went back and I've rewatched it. I thought it was the thing that I was just reminded by when Kenny isn't doing dumb stuff and silly stuff, how good he can be.
Yeah.
And I thought Gabe Kidd felt like he came across here as like, this is the guy who needs to be in the rung of the top 4 or 5 guys in the company. Because I thought this was tremendous from beginning to end. It was a lot more brutal than I expected it to be. A lot of blood. The table spots, the power bomb he delivered through the table as well. At the same time, it was like dragon suplex to the outside. Kenny absolutely juiced a gusher, to use that old sort of wrestling term there as well. I thought in terms of, there was one bit that was the counter to the one-winged angel, which he then put into an abdominal stretch, which felt like a kind of very young lion move. But it also plays into the idea of working his midsection because of the diverticulitis. I can't obviously not say that. Diverticulitis. That's the one on there. I thought this was absolutely tremendous, and it was so much better than I thought it would be. I had lessened expectations because sometimes there's been big matches with Kenny and you've kind of wondered, but you just thought, no, bring him back, use him quite sparingly, but just that knowledge of when he is in there and he's wrestling matches, he's going to be great. Unprotected chair shots to the head, I can do without that in this day and age. Like, I don't think it added anything either. No. And that's not me being safety police. I just don't ever see necessarily the point of them as well. But this was gritty as hell. It was messy at points and it felt like a fight, but then that's what Gabe Kidd's character is like. But what did you make of this, Karen?
So, of course, I love a big hero's return. And I think Kenny choosing to come back at the Dome was a bold choice, but the right choice. And when I think of the level of match quality I expect in a Tokyo Dome show, this match is it's not the baseline, but it's kind of like overall what I would hope people would try to achieve for. I found it being a very bold design choice that Gabe Kidd kind of had an Ishii cosplay with like the black trunks and the War Dogs logo on one side, and surprisingly, the New Japan, a giant ass lion mark on the other leg. I was like, are you a baby face now, sir? Because that's a baby face move for a heel faction.
Crowd reacted like he was a baby face.
I'll get to that. Having Drilla Maloney, I wanted to call him Daniel, having Daniel and Clark at the ringside. I have never seen those guys be so hype for a match. And like Clark's like literally running back and forth, getting the crowd going. And it was when we talk about people being made into a star, this was Gabe. I mean, he's had great matches. This was a star-making performance. You saw him get emotional throughout the match because, he's had a lot of struggles. He struggled with his mental health. He struggled with Twitter like many of us do. And it was one of those things where I was kind of like, I mean, I knew this was going to be a good match, but this is like probably the match out of the entire weekend that I was like full on locked in, leaning in, not, feet up on my ottoman, having a glass of wine and enjoying my day. And it was the blood aside, because, I'm squeamish about it, the table spots and the chair spots aside, it was one of those things where you saw the flashes of Gabe Kidd, who he was before he left on excursion to go back to the US and join LA Dojo. You saw who he was. You saw his career throughout this entire match from start to finish. Tanahashi was a right sight, crying his eyes out at ringside as he should, full on snot-nosed. No one on commentary had a handkerchief for this man. I don't know. But it was what I would basically call a love letter to wrestling. Like, you want to create a new star, that's how you create a new star. The problem is that the people who are the star makers are not the people that they have in New Japan right now. They've all been signed away to AEW.
Yeah.
Because I'll say it again. You could have had Ospreay have a singles match against one of the young guys, and it could have been an outstanding match. You could have brought back Okada, have Okada finally put somebody over, but I know that's not what they're doing with him right now. And even, I mean, my love-hate relationship with Jay White aside, the Japanese fans would have lost their shit for Jay White to come back at a Tokyo Dome of all places. And I feel like that's overall, when we look at this whole weekend as a whole, I just feel like it's such an incredibly missed opportunity. But yeah, this match was my, like, all my love for New Japan aside, this was my match of the weekend because the build was short, but it was exactly what it needed to be. Could I have done with less blood? Sure, but somebody's got to bleed. Moxley's not around, and neither is Ospreay. So somebody's got to sneeze and just bleed all over the place. But yeah, this was it. I'm going to talk about Keno and Kento later, but this is like this became the match of the year with like the fifth day of 2025.
Yeah,
we got 360 left, but this is like the bar. This is the bar now.
It's going to be up there. And I think there's probably one of the things I would say that was a bit annoying because in previous great Tokyo Dome matches, I think pre-Chris Charlton was very much into oversell mode kind of straight away. And it was like really when the matches have been at their best in New Japan of years gone by, whether it's been a Rocky Romero or Steve Corino or even a Don Callis or doing color commentary, it's actually been a little bit more subtle and understated. And I think we could have done with that. But that's minor quibbles, really minor quibbles. This did the job of putting Gabe Kidd over. Yeah. I know, and it also then cemented the idea that Kenny is, when it comes to those big matches, on his days, the best big match wrestler in the world. Like he can work at a level that others can't. And you just move. I mean, I know I won't get into contract season stuff because it feels like we've already said it earlier on. It's like you don't really know what the lay of the land is straight away for this.
I will say that David Finlay was noticeably absent and had plenty of time to show up and corner for him. But again, that's neither here nor there. But my thing for me is that's why, for me, I've enjoyed listening to Japanese commentary because while there is those highs and lows of excitement, I like to, especially at like 3:00 in the morning. I don't want I don't need the constant enthusiasm because it gives me a headache. So I enjoy listening to the Japanese commentary because a lot of it is more understated but still powerful.
Yeah, and this, you move heaven and earth to keep Gabe Kidd. This is one of your guys. And to be honest, if he goes to AEW, if he goes to WWE, he has to tamper down this character, which for all of its flaws is effectively the character of a man who's still growing up. So he's going to be elements of immaturity in it. And I think that's fine because I think it's part of your bigger character-based wrestling. I think that's the story you can kind of tell with him. But my God, like he can deliver when it comes to like big matches. And he feels like this is someone who, when it hits G1 season, this is someone who needs to be there in the semi-finals, the very least. A feud with Finlay, depending on what Finlay's up to as well. I think that's something you could go down there as well. And I don't think there's a lot I would necessarily say change, but it was easily, I thought, actually like the best of the best of the matches across the weekend for this. And I thought, sorry, go on.
I do appreciate that he did a lot less of his 14-year-old boy hand gestures. There's a lot less of that and a lot less unnecessary mouthing off for the sake of mouthing off. Like the things he said and communicated in the match had purpose, as opposed to just the shock value. Because it's like, you're not a 14-year-old boy. Stop acting like one.
That's it for that. And Zach, again, there was the unenviable task of following that up with with Ricochet, who is kind of back in the fold, but obviously in AEW is involved in big storyline involving Swerve Strickland. It appears to be that he's kind of finally found his character in AEW. He found his character in wrestling in this version of him having worked WWE, where he was incredibly bland, I felt, and a sort of like sort of Ricochet cosplay stuff at times from what I would remember from the junior division. Yeah. I thought this was actually, even though it had an impossible task and I'd had a break before seeing this, I thought if I go straight into this match, it's going to kind of like, it's going to bother me. I wanted almost like a bit of a breather from this. Yeah. So when I went back and I watched this, when I watched this match, it was like kind of in isolation. And I actually thought it was like a really, I thought compared to the main event the night before, this was a much better match. It started off at a kind of cracking pace. I thought it was like really, really entertaining. In the main, I thought it, not as good as Gabriel Kidd and Kenny Omega, but I thought actually this was still at like kind of like the higher end, and it was the kind of match that Zach's needed for this as well. And he got to cut his, wonderful post-match promo in there as well, where he used an old advertising slogan for Orange, who used to be like a mobile phone provider here. And
is that what that was?
Provider. The future's bright, the future's orange. It was the tagline there. He loves his niche British references. But I actually thought this was like a really fun match, and I enjoyed it for what it was, and I didn't have the highest level of expectations.
It was one of those things where I'm glad Zach got a second match this weekend that had stakes and purpose. I made the offhanded joke that, them like on AEW programming, the MVP and company kind of like shook Ricochet down like they owed him milk money. And they made him like look like a complete nerd. I didn't want to be like disappointed wayface watching this match. And then, I record that statement with Bruce, and then like 2 days later, he's on Dynamite or whatever, pulling out scissors and trying to like stab Strickland in the head or whatever. So I was like, oh, this is a little more interesting. I'm glad that Ricochet did not do the unhinged version of him, and that he just brought back the wrestler that cut his teeth and made his way in New Japan to face Zach. And it's one of those things where I enjoyed the match. I liked it a lot more than him versus Umino because it didn't go 40 minutes. I think for title matches, I like them usually to be around less than 25 if possible. But yeah, it was a nice way to close the show. I was actually surprised that the show was as short as it was. It felt like it moved very fast despite having a lot of matches on it. It
did. It was like I get bothered by the amount of matches on cards as well. Sometimes WWE kind of hit the sweet spot where they have those lesser matches and you can go to a lot more in there. But actually, I thought 20 minutes, given what he'd had to do the night before, was fair on Zach. Yeah. Because he's had to do 40 the night before, 20 here as well. 20 is about right. I think you can bring Ricochet in. Again, mentioning slots for G1s and the like New Japan Cups. Ricochet, if you can get him in there as well, like I think would be a really good shout. But yeah, that's really good. And it kind of, I think in the main, I think we've both enjoyed Wrestle Dynasty. He's probably enjoyed it more than Wrestle Kingdom. I think in my case, I can safely say I thought this was like a good card. I wish in some ways it felt bigger. That's like you say, I think there's that bit of fat in the middle of the card that could have been kind of trimmed out from there as well. But I think overall in the main, I'd be giving this show a thumbs up. I think there's some the good stuff in here is really good. And that's obviously your Kenny Gabe match and your never open weight title match. I think they're the kind of like main obvious highlights, but don't sleep on the main either. I think that's a important one to do there. It was one of those things where I went in, like, not being a diehard AEW fan anymore. It was just kind of like, I wanted to be cautiously optimistic, but I also knew that there was going to be that imbalance of like the wins and losses would be traded, but who won certain like the title matches versus who just won one that has no consequences whatsoever. I knew that was going to be an issue. Let's see, matches. Of course, Kid versus Omega. I'd say Zach and Ricochet. And sleeper hit. For fun, go watch the Lucha Gauntlet match. Yeah. For all the flippy fun. Yeah. And a relatively easy watch. Yeah. Which you've not always been able to say about New Japan big shows over the last year. I do put this very much in a New Japan big show with a bit of AEW involvement in there as well. But before we get out of here, we've got a couple of minutes left. What would be the other things? There's obviously been a ton of wrestling on over last week. What would be a couple of things you would recommend to our listeners? All right. So if you happen to come across Stardom Dream Queendom from December 29th, the Wonder of Stardom Championship between Natsupoi and Starlight Kid, and the World of Stardom Championship between Tam Nakano and Sai Kamitani, please go watch those matches. They are wonderful. Also, the Goddess tag matches with Tekla and Momo Watanabe against Saya Ida and Hanan. All fantastic. And then go out of your way and chase up Noah the New Year. It's
It's probably my favorite tradition over at Post is covering Noah the New Year because it's very much like a grab bag. I never know what I'm going to get. But if you have lots of qualms about Kenta in New Japan, go watch him and Kenoh destroy one another. Like, you want to know why Kenta was signed by the WWE? Go watch this match. And even Kenta, like, what's the phrase? Take the piss. He takes the piss out of himself because he posted a picture on Instagram of him and Kenoh on the 1st. And he's like, January 1st versus January 4th, where he's like power walking during the Rambo. So and that's leading into a story where him and Kenoh are now, because it's the 25th anniversary year of Noah, they're going to be teaming up together to fight Ozawa and the new big bad that's arrived in Noah. So I say this because Ozawa versus Kiyomiya. You want a boilerplate how to do dictionary definition of how to turn a guy heel and make it stick. Ozawa's been wrestling for 2.5 years about. I remember reading about him at the very first Noah show I did 3 years ago. And it's like late day. He's now this unhinged, like leopard print wearing bad guy with a Weasley mustache and really, awkwardly cropped hair, but can do a Phoenix splash. This is really, really pretty. And is the leader of Team 2000X. But the way he reads Kiyomiya to rights. He calls him out about being the poster boy and, portraying the perfect image of the boy next door while also being like a chain smoker and, maybe concealing an actual live-in girlfriend and, basically trying to act like he's single just so all the girlies will love him and be their pop idol poster boy. And, I'm fairly certain that Kiyomiya signed off on it because there were pictures. He came with the receipts and it was so delicious. But yeah, so those two. And of course, if you want presentation, Shinsuke Nakamura coming back after 2 years to fight Oka Sasaki. That's like the presentation alone. It gives Shinsuke Nakamura in a WrestleMania main event for a guy that's been wrestling for less than a year or just over a year.
Now, some great shouts there as well. I just want to do a really quick shout because I'm just intrigued to see where it goes. It could be awful, but I'm game for it. Omos and Noah. Why not? Why not?
He seems excited to be there. Yep. I'm still not sure of the pairing of him and Jack Morris, but the way that he threw Marufuji like 20, like into the 28th row.
Yeah.
Marufuji was doing the Lord's work during that match.
It is. And that takes us to the end. Karen, thank you for this. He's done a whistle-stop review of a number of shows there. Thank you so much. He says that as I can hear my toddler son sobbing outside the door of where I'm recording. He does this a lot. He's at that point in the evening. God love him. This is what he's like. We'll get him back into a normal routine.
Like, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet?
I could see her going to the door, laying down the subtle hints. But where can the good folk at GRAPPL find you?
Oh, well, I am GRAPPL's Karen Peterson. Most of my work is available over at postwrestling.com. Most recently, yesterday, Bruce Lord and I reviewed, a little program called Wrestle Kingdom 19 in the Tokyo Dome. And then, of course, WH Park and I will be bringing the band back together for 2025 later this coming week when we do our post-ProRes review. And got my column, all that monthly goodness stuff, and who knows? Maybe I'll be on the GRAPPL again sometime soon.
Please,
anytime.
I would say honestly, I'm so looking forward to how WH reacts to all of these. I'm not entirely sure how he has, but I'm looking forward to find out. It's
going to go off the rails. It'll be fine.
And I would always say that the work that you and Bruce do in reviewing those New Japan big shows is incredible. Like, it really is. Like, absolutely brilliant. It's like you're the go-to guys for all of that. But that is absolutely brilliant. So
thank you.
All I have to say is, at this point, thank you ever so much, Karen.
You're welcome.
And goodbye. Bye.